War awakened the true power of the human princess. From the royal balcony, Princess Lyra watched them, her dark eyes reflecting the distant lights, and felt a strange mix of pride and unease. For years, humanity had lived peacefully, growing colonies at the edge of the Orion expanse, trading with nearby civilizations, and quietly improving their technology. Yet deep inside, Lyra knew that peace was fragile. She could feel it in the whispers of the wind that brushed against the palace towers, in the restless movements of her people, and in the unspoken tension that even her advisors could not disguise. She had spent her childhood in the palace, surrounded by luxury and safety. Tutors taught her languages, diplomacy, history, and the art of war, though many dismissed the lessons as precautionary exercises. Her parents, the king and queen, treated her with both affection and care, yet they never spoke openly of the dangers lurking beyond human borders. To them, she was the fragile heir to a peaceful kingdom, a symbol of hope and continuity rather than a warrior. Lyra, however, refused to accept such limits. Every night she practiced combat drills in the training halls, sometimes for hours, letting her body grow strong and agile. She learned how to wield a sword, operate the newest weapons, and move silently through shadows. No one outside her trusted circle knew of her efforts, and that secrecy gave her a strange thrill. But all of that preparation felt insignificant when the first signs of the Zephyrian attack appeared. Scouts reported strange vessels moving at impossible speeds, their hulls shimmering with energy humans had never seen before. The Zephyrians were a race of advanced beings, towering in size and intellect, with technology that made human ships look like fragile toys. No one had anticipated they would come to Urandor, and certainly no one expected them to attack without warning. The invasion began in the outer colonies. Entire cities vanished under the destructive energy of Zephyrian warships. Human defenses were swift but inadequate. The military, trained for conventional threats, struggled against weapons that bent the laws of physics and wiped out entire fleets in moments. Panic spread, and with it, a wave of fear that reached even the fortified palace walls. Advisors urged the royal family to evacuate immediately, to preserve the bloodline at all costs. But Lyra could not stand by while her people suffered. She refused to leave, despite warnings and threats from those who believed her life was too precious to risk. That night, under the dim light of the moon, Lyra moved quietly through the palace corridors. She entered the royal archives, a vast chamber filled with ancient texts and secret knowledge, hidden from even the most curious eyes. These were the records of humanity's forgotten history, long before the establishment of modern colonies. They spoke of human ingenuity and courage, of ancestors who had faced insurmountable odds and prevailed, not through brute force, but through creativity, cunning, and the strength of spirit. Among the scrolls and data crystals, Lyra discovered references to latent abilities humans once possessed, powers not commonly seen today, though apparently present in the bloodline of certain families, including her own. The words intrigued her. She felt a stirring deep within, as if a part of herself that had lain dormant was beginning to awaken. Could it be possible that humans had more potential than the galaxy believed? Could she, a princess who had been sheltered her whole life, become something more? She spent hours studying the manuscripts, learning the principles, techniques, and meditations described in obscure texts. Each page filled her with determination. Humanity might be underestimated, but that did not mean it was weak. As dawn broke, the distant hum of Zephyrian engines reached the palace walls. Lyra left the archives and went to the observation tower, where the city sprawled below her like a living organism. Smoke rose from the outer colonies. Explosions dotted the horizon. Panic-stricken citizens ran through the streets, their faces marked with fear and confusion. Yet amidst the chaos, she noticed something else: moments of bravery. A young engineer had rigged a makeshift weapon to destroy a Zephyrian scout. A small militia unit was ambushing enemy patrols with unexpected precision. Even as the invaders seemed invincible, humanity's spirit was flickering, refusing to die. Lyra descended to the ground that morning, leaving the palace with only a few trusted guards. She moved through the city incognito, observing the actions of her people. She saw mothers hiding children in basements, teachers leading students to safe zones, and citizens improvising weapons from whatever they could find. It was in these quiet moments that she understood the true power of her people. Humans did not rely solely on strength or technology. They relied on ingenuity, courage, and an unshakable will to survive. Her first act of defiance came without planning. A Zephyrian drone was attacking a supply convoy on the outskirts of the city. Lyra and a small group of volunteers rushed to the scene. Using the techniques she had learned from the archives, she guided the humans to set traps, manipulate terrain, and confuse the drone's sensors. The attack was a success. Supplies were saved and the drone was destroyed. When the volunteers cheered, Lyra felt something extraordinary. It was not her physical ability alone that had achieved victory. It was her leadership, her vision, and the untested courage of ordinary humans coming together under her guidance. Word of the princess who fights spread quickly. In hushed whispers and nervous glances, people began to believe that perhaps humanity could survive this invasion. Lyra moved from village to village, rallying militias, training volunteers, and sharing knowledge gleaned from the archives. With each act, her confidence grew, as did a strange energy she could not fully explain. Occasionally, in moments of intense focus or emotion, she felt a tingling in her body, as if the air itself responded to her will. Small objects shifted slightly, light flickered, and the hum of energy in the atmosphere became tangible. She dismissed it at first, thinking it a trick of imagination, but it would not go away. Meanwhile, the Zephyrians observed these human successes with confusion and irritation. They had expected an easy conquest, yet every step they took was countered by unexpected strategy and cunning. Human attacks, though technologically inferior, were precise and unpredictable. The invaders could not understand why such fragile beings resisted with such determination. Reports reached their high command of a child princess, who seemed to lead the resistance, and many dismissed it as propaganda. Yet the losses mounted, and doubt began to creep even into the minds of their generals. Lyra's days were filled with endless motion. She rarely slept, moving from one battlefield to the next, always observing, always learning. She listened to the fears and hopes of her people, discovering that the greatest weapon humans possessed was not a gun or a starship, but their indomitable spirit. Civilians who had never held a weapon found courage in her presence. Soldiers fought harder, inspired by her leadership. Every act of resistance, every clever tactic, every small victory reinforced a lesson she would carry with her forever. Humans were not weak, they were underestimated, and their true potential was only beginning to awaken. During a rare moment of rest, Lyra returned to the palace archives. There, she uncovered an ancient human codex that described abilities long lost to modern memory. Enhanced reflexes, energy manipulation, heightened perception, and the ability to influence physical objects with mental focus. It spoke of humans as latent masters of energy and matter, capable of feats beyond the understanding of alien civilizations. The text suggested that only extreme circumstances, like war or great peril, could awaken these latent abilities. Lyra pondered the meaning of these words. Could this be what she had been feeling, the tingling energy, the subtle shifts in the world around her? Perhaps the invasion, the suffering of her people, and the desperate need to survive were unlocking powers humans had long forgotten. A shiver of excitement ran through her. The war that had begun as a nightmare might also be the crucible that revealed humanity's true strength. She did not know how far her abilities could go, but she felt the first hints of something extraordinary. It was a quiet, simmering force, waiting to be shaped by her will. Every decision she made, every command she gave, every small victory in the streets of Urandor seemed to feed this hidden energy. She began to understand that her role was not merely to survive or to lead, but to awaken the potential of every human who followed her. As night fell, Lyra stood on the balcony once again, gazing at the stars. The Zephyrian ships still loomed in the distance, their alien lights cutting through the darkness. Yet for the first time she did not feel fear. She felt purpose. She felt the weight of responsibility, yes, but also a sense of destiny. Humanity had always been underestimated, dismissed as weak and insignificant. But under her guidance and with the latent power stirring in their veins, they would not just survive, they would fight back. The first sparks of the human uprising were igniting, quiet but unstoppable. Lyra could feel it in the heartbeat of the city, in the courage of ordinary citizens, and in the whispers of the air around her. The princess, once thought delicate and fragile, was beginning to awaken. And with her the true power of humanity, long hidden and underestimated, began to stir. Tomorrow, the war would reach the city gates. Tomorrow, the humans would face the Zephyrian assault head-on. And tomorrow, Princess Lyra would take her first steps toward awakening the full potential of herself, her people, and the legacy of humanity. The stars continued to shine, indifferent yet full of promise. Somewhere in the infinite darkness, the galaxy was watching. And for the first time in centuries, it would notice humanity not as a weak species to be conquered, but as a force rising from the shadows, led by a princess who refused to bow. The Zephyrians were confident. From their command ships, they watched the human defenses struggle to hold even small colonies. They had fought many races across the galaxy, and no one had resisted for long. Humans, in their eyes, were fragile, untrained, and predictable. Their arrogance made them underestimate what was coming. Princess Lyra moved through the rebel encampments with calm determination. She no longer stayed hidden in the palace. Every day, she visited soldiers, engineers, and civilians alike, learning what they could do, understanding their fears, and teaching them how to turn those fears into strength. Her presence alone inspired people to fight harder. Even the youngest recruits, barely old enough to hold a weapon, felt courage when she spoke. They called her the War Princess, a title that made her blush, yet she accepted it, knowing symbols were as important as tactics. Lyra had begun to understand the strange energy that surged within her. It was subtle at first, small movements of objects, brief flashes of perception that allowed her to anticipate enemy attacks. But the more she practiced, the more control she gained. She taught herself to focus, to guide her intuition in ways that seemed almost magical. When a soldier raised a gun to fire, Lyra would sense the Zephyrian strike before it came. When a trap needed to be set, she could predict exactly where the enemy would move. It was as if the battlefield whispered its secrets to her. The first major test of her growing powers came at the colony of Arthen. The Zephyrians launched a full assault, deploying hundreds of drones and armored walkers designed to crush human resistance. The militia was outnumbered and outgunned, and fear ran deep through the streets. Civilians had barricaded themselves in homes, hoping to survive the attack. Lyra arrived just as the first explosions shook the city, the ground trembling under alien fire. She did not panic. Instead, she surveyed the battlefield, noting positions, weaknesses, and escape routes. Then she acted. Using signals and hand gestures, she coordinated her forces. Civilians who had never held a weapon were instructed to block key streets, set simple traps, and lure Zephyrian drones into narrow alleys. Soldiers used guerrilla tactics, striking quickly and disappearing before the alien forces could respond. Lyra moved with them, guiding their actions as if she could see the battlefield from above. The Zephyrians expected a straightforward battle. They were unprepared for humans who fought like shadows, striking from unexpected angles and retreating only to strike again. Lyra's strategies combined ingenuity with her growing powers. When a Zephyrian walker aimed at a group of humans, she focused, sensing the vibrations of the ground and the machine's energy. The walker stumbled, its sensors failing for a brief moment, just long enough for human soldiers to destroy it with makeshift explosives. Victory at Arthen was not complete. Many lives were lost, and much of the city lay in ruins. Yet the survivors celebrated as though they had won a major war. They had stood against the invaders, and more importantly, they had followed the princess and survived. Lyra understood the deeper lesson. Humans were resilient, and leadership could awaken courage even in the weakest hearts. Word of Arthen's defense spread like wildfire. Across the colonies, humans whispered stories of the war princess, her leadership, and her strange abilities. Zephyrian forces, once confident, grew cautious. They sent scouts to investigate, but even these elite units found themselves outmaneuvered and confused. Reports reached the Zephyrian High Command. Humans were unpredictable, their strategies unorthodox, and a mysterious leader was guiding them with uncanny precision. Many dismissed it as coincidence, yet the losses were undeniable. Lyra did not allow herself to be distracted by recognition or fear of the enemy. She continued training herself, her abilities, and her people. Every night, she returned to the archives, reading more about the ancient techniques humans had lost. She discovered exercises to enhance mental focus, meditation methods to sharpen perception, and techniques that allowed small bursts of energy manipulation. She began practicing these in secret, often late at night in the palace gardens. At first, she could only create small sparks of energy or sense faint vibrations, but with time, the effects grew stronger. Sometimes she could move objects slightly without touching them. Sometimes she anticipated a soldier's mistake and corrected it before it happened. Her growth did not go unnoticed by those closest to her. Commander Harren, the leader of the human militia, observed her abilities with awe and caution. "Princess," he said one evening, "you are not just inspiring people, you are changing the very nature of our fight. But you must be careful. The Zephyrians will notice if you become too powerful too quickly." Lyra nodded. She understood the risk, yet she could not hold back. "We do not have the luxury of caution, Harren," she replied. "If we survive together. If we fail, humanity may be lost. I have to try." The Zephyrians launched their next assault on the human mining colony of Taylor, a hub of vital resources. Lyra led a team to reinforce defenses, organize evacuations, and prepare ambushes. The colony was hilly, with narrow passes perfect for guerrilla warfare. She used every advantage, setting traps, creating false routes, and positioning marksmen at hidden points. Her psionic sense allowed her to anticipate Zephyrian movements, predicting patrols, supply drops, and attack patterns. When the battle began, chaos erupted. Zephyrian ships fired from orbit and walkers descended into the valley, yet the humans were ready. Mines exploded at precise moments, traps funneled the enemy into kill zones, and Lyra's soldiers struck with deadly efficiency. Civilians guided the militia, acting as eyes and messengers. Lyra herself moved at the center of the fight, her presence both shield and inspiration. She felt the energy around her hum and pulse, and she focused it, nudging the battlefield in subtle ways. Drones misfired, energy shields flickered, and enemy movements became predictable. By nightfall, the battle was over. Human losses were heavy, yet the Zephyrians had been forced to retreat. Taylor was scarred, but it remained under human control. The survivors hailed Lyra as a living legend, but she did not celebrate. She knew this was only the beginning. Every battle revealed her abilities more clearly, but she also realized the Zephyrians would adapt if they understood her power. The stakes were higher than ever. Lyra spent the following days training selected soldiers in what she called intuition techniques, exercises designed to sharpen their awareness and reaction times. Some of them showed hints of latent ability, subtle flashes that mirrored what she had experienced. She encouraged them, knowing that the survival of humanity might depend not just on her powers, but on awakening the hidden potential in others. Meanwhile, the Zephyrians prepared for a decisive strike. Their high command had grown increasingly concerned about reports of human resistance. They could not understand how a primitive species could challenge their technology so effectively. They assigned an elite general, a master strategist named Varkin, to lead the next campaign. Varkin was ruthless, intelligent, and patient. He studied human tactics, waiting for the perfect moment to crush the rebellion. But even he could not anticipate the strength of a people fighting not just for survival, but for their very identity. Lyra sensed the tension rising. The Zephyrians would not rest, and every victory came with higher stakes. Yet she was no longer afraid. Each encounter, each success, each life saved strengthened her resolve. Her powers continued to grow, subtle yet undeniable. When she focused, she could feel the threads of movement and energy around her, sensing the battlefield like a living web. Her confidence became a force in itself, radiating to those who fought with her. In one encounter near the mining cliffs of Darwin, Lyra faced her first direct confrontation with Zephyrian scouts. Alone, she observed their patrols and realized that their strategy relied on overconfidence. Using her energy focus, she created a subtle diversion, causing one of their drones to misfire, drawing the rest of the patrol into a trap. Her soldiers, hidden nearby, struck at the perfect moment. Within minutes, the scouts were defeated, and their advanced weaponry captured for study. Lyra held the energy of victory in her hands like a tangible thing, a promise that humanity could survive against impossible odds. By the end of the second month of war, human colonies began coordinating more effectively. Messages traveled quickly, resistance cells acted in concert, and the legend of the war princess became an anchor of hope. Lyra's leadership transformed ordinary civilians into skilled defenders, ordinary soldiers into innovators. And through it all, she honed her latent abilities, testing their limits and discovering their potential. One quiet evening, after weeks of continuous battle, Lyra stood on a cliff overlooking the ruins of a small colony. Fires smoldered below, and the wind carried the scent of smoke and metal. She felt the pulse of human spirit beneath her feet, the stubborn determination that refused to die. The Zephyrians might have technology, numbers, and size on their side, but humanity had something they could never understand: the will to fight for survival, freedom, and identity. Her thoughts were interrupted by Commander Heron, who approached silently. "Princess," he said, his voice low, "the Zephyrians will strike again soon. They are sending reinforcements stronger than before." Lyra turned, her eyes calm yet fierce. "Then we will be ready," she replied. "Every person who stands with us, every mind we awaken, every heart we inspire, that is our strength. They may be stronger, faster, and more advanced, but we have something they do not. We are human, and we will not break." As night fell, the stars above Urindor shone brightly, indifferent yet full of possibility. Lyra closed her eyes and focused, feeling the energy around her stir, a quiet promise of what was to come. Humanity had survived its first tests, but the war was only beginning. She could sense the challenges ahead, the sacrifices yet to be made, and the heights she would need to reach. Yet for the first time she felt certain of one thing: humans were not weak, and under her guidance they were becoming a force that no invader could ignore. The galaxy had begun to notice. Whispers of the war princess spread through the stars, reaching even the ears of the Zephyrians, who struggled to comprehend the phenomenon. Lyra's path was still uncertain, the battles far from over, but the seeds of awakening had been sown. Humanity, underestimated and dismissed for centuries, was beginning to rise, and at the heart of that rise was a princess who refused to bow. The war had escalated to a scale no human had ever imagined. The Zephyrians, enraged by repeated setbacks, were relentless in their pursuit. Entire colonies had been destroyed, yet humanity refused to surrender. Each battle, each small victory, added to the legend of the war princess, and Princess Lyra herself had changed from a sheltered royal into a leader whose presence electrified the battlefield. Lyra moved through the rubble of a partially destroyed colony, her senses alert. She had learned to anticipate enemy moves, not just through strategy, but through her growing abilities, a subtle power that she barely understood. Sometimes she could feel the vibrations of machines before they moved. Sometimes she could sense the intention behind an enemy's action, as though the future whispered itself to her in fleeting moments. It was no longer a curiosity, it had become a weapon. Her soldiers watched her closely, inspired not just by her skill, but by her calm and clarity. Even when explosions rocked the ground and Zephyrian energy beams cut through the air, Lyra remained steady. "Focus," she would say, her voice quiet but commanding. "Observe, predict, act. We fight not just with strength but with thought and courage." The Zephyrians were preparing for a major strike, a concentrated assault on the industrial hub of Korath, a human colony that supplied food, weapons, and critical energy resources. They intended to crush human resistance in one decisive blow, believing that the loss of Korath would force the remaining colonies into submission. Lyra understood the stakes. She had anticipated this move through reports, scouting data, and her growing intuition. She immediately began coordinating defenses, devising tactics that combined conventional warfare with the new abilities she was awakening in herself, and select human soldiers. In secret, she trained a small group of individuals she believed were ready to tap into latent human potential. Some displayed subtle energy manipulation, others exhibited heightened perception or reflexes. The training was intense and exhausting, but Lyra knew it was necessary. Humanity's survival depended on more than numbers or technology. It depended on unlocking the hidden strengths that had always lain dormant. When the Zephyrians arrived, their fleet was massive. Ships hung like dark clouds in orbit, while walkers and drones poured onto the planet's surface. Lyra stood on the command platform of the main defensive station, overlooking the city. She could feel the tension radiating from the ground, from her people, and even from the wind. Then she focused, extending her awareness. Subtle at first, then stronger, she sensed the movements of every enemy unit, their energy signatures, and even the rhythm of their mechanical steps. It was as though the battlefield itself was revealing its secrets to her. The first wave struck with brutal force. Energy beams scorched the streets, and Zephyrian walkers advanced without hesitation. Yet humans, guided by Lyra's strategies, moved unpredictably. Civilians acted as eyes and messengers, marking enemy positions and assisting militia units. Soldiers who had trained with her for weeks now moved with almost preternatural coordination, anticipating each step of their enemies. Mines detonated at perfect moments, barricades appeared exactly where needed, and ambushes struck from unexpected directions. Lyra herself led from the front, directing operations while subtly using her abilities. She focused on the energy of the battlefield, sensing weak points in the Zephyrian formations. A group of walkers moved into a narrow pass, and she concentrated, nudging the vibrations of the ground, creating a small shift that caused the machines to stumble. Human soldiers took advantage of the moment, striking with explosives and bladed weapons. Drones misfired, falling from the sky, and humans captured Zephyrian technology that would later give them an advantage. It was during the heat of battle that Lyra discovered the full potential of her power. As a massive energy cannon prepared to fire from a Zephyrian ship in orbit, She felt the vibrations of the weapon, its timing, and the patterns of the energy flow. She extended her awareness outward, focusing on the beam as it formed, and to her astonishment, she was able to disrupt its path. The energy scattered, exploding harmlessly into space instead of raining destruction on the city below. Soldiers around her froze in disbelief, realizing that what they had thought impossible had just happened. Lyra did not pause to celebrate. The battle was far from over. The Zephyrians adapted quickly, sending specialized units to capture or kill her. A squad of elite warriors landed near her position, moving with precision and deadly intent. Lyra sensed them approaching before they were visible. She directed her soldiers to flank them while she focused on the energy around her. With a concentrated thought, she created a force that subtly shifted the ground beneath the enemy, tripping them and scattering their formation. The humans struck in perfect unison, neutralizing the threat. As the battle raged, Lyra realized the true scope of what was happening. This was no longer a simple conflict of technology versus technology. It was a test of human potential, of creativity, courage, and latent power. Every act of bravery, every clever maneuver, and every surge of determination fed the energy she wielded. She could feel the bond between her and her people growing, a shared understanding that they were not just fighting for survival, they were awakening a new strength within themselves. By the end of the first day of the battle, the human forces had gained a surprising advantage. Zephyrian losses were significant, and their forward momentum was slowed. Civilians cheered, soldiers celebrated quietly, and Lyra allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. Yet she knew this was only the beginning. The High Command would respond, sending even greater forces, and the war would escalate further. Humanity's survival depended on pushing even harder, training more people, and mastering powers that had been hidden for centuries. The following nights were a blur of strategy meetings, training sessions, and battlefield assessments. Lyra's abilities continued to grow. She could manipulate energy in larger and more controlled ways, sense enemy movements across wider areas, and even influence objects at a distance. Soldiers who had trained under her guidance began showing similar, though less developed, abilities. It was becoming clear. The war was awakening more than human skill. It was unlocking something fundamental in their species. Despite her progress, Lyra faced moments of doubt. She worried about the cost of the war, the lives lost, and the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders. She wandered through the quiet streets of surviving colonies, observing families who had survived yet were haunted by fear and grief. She realized that her power, though extraordinary, could not replace human compassion, ingenuity, or will. Leadership required more than ability. It required understanding, empathy, and courage. She vowed never to forget that lesson, even as she prepared to confront the greatest threat humanity had ever faced. The Zephyrians launched their next major offensive with unmatched fury. Entire fleets appeared in orbit, deploying waves of drones and walkers simultaneously across multiple colonies. The intent was clear: crush humanity quickly and decisively. Lyra and her commanders had anticipated this, but the scale was larger than anything they had faced before. She knew that success would require combining every element of human ingenuity, every latent ability, and every ounce of courage her people could muster. The battle began at dawn. Lyra moved like a shadow among her soldiers, coordinating attacks, predicting enemy movements, and subtly influencing the flow of energy around her. She guided ambushes with precision, instructed civilians to aid in defenses, and directed engineers to repurpose captured Zephyrian technology. The humans fought like never before, inspired by the presence of their princess and the knowledge that they could rise beyond expectation. It was during the climax of this battle that Lyra fully embraced her power. A massive Zephyrian warship descended, its energy beams capable of leveling entire city blocks. Lyra focused every ounce of attention and energy she had, sensing the ship's power and rhythm. She extended her will, guiding the flow of energy to disrupt its systems. The ship faltered, its shields flickering, its weapons misfiring. Human forces seized the opportunity, striking at critical points and forcing the alien vessel to retreat. The victory was not without cost. Many humans had died, cities lay in ruins, and the war was far from over. But the impact was undeniable. For the first time, the Zephyrians hesitated. They had faced humans before, but never a force guided by a leader who could shape the battlefield itself. Lyra had transformed the conflict. No longer were humans merely defending. They were challenging, innovating, and surviving against impossible odds. That night, Lyra stood on the highest tower of the main command center, overlooking the city. Fires burned in the distance, yet the people cheered. She could feel the energy of human will radiating from every corner, every heart, every mind. It was no longer just her power. It was the collective strength of a species awakening to its potential. She understood, more clearly than ever, that this war was more than survival. It was a crucible forging humanity into something stronger, smarter, and more formidable than the galaxy had ever imagined. The legend of the War Princess had reached its turning point. She was no longer a princess sheltered by palace walls. She was a leader, a strategist, and a beacon of hope. Her powers, once small and uncertain, had grown to a scale that could alter the course of battles and inspire entire civilizations. Humanity was no longer underestimated. They were feared, respected, and beginning to realize their true potential. Lyra knew the coming battles would be even greater. The Zephyrians would not yield, and their high command would deploy everything they had. Yet she was ready. With each day, each battle, and each act of courage, humanity was awakening. The war was no longer a simple fight for survival. It was the forging of a species, the awakening of latent power, and the proving of the unbreakable spirit of humans. And at the heart of it all was Princess Lyra, the War Princess, who had embraced her destiny and would lead her people to a future the galaxy could never ignore. The final assault was unlike anything humanity had ever faced. The Zephyrians, infuriated and humiliated by repeated defeats, deployed their most advanced fleets and armies. Ships hung in orbit like dark, ominous clouds, while massive walkers and drones poured onto the surface of Urindor, the human homeworld. Every city, every colony, every stronghold became a battlefield. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. Princess Lyra stood on the central command tower of the capital city, looking down at the streets below. Civilians had been evacuated, leaving only soldiers, engineers, and volunteers ready to defend their planet. Lyra's dark eyes reflected both determination and resolve. She had grown from a sheltered princess into a leader whose courage inspired millions. Her abilities had evolved into something extraordinary. She could sense the movements of enemy troops before they acted, subtly manipulate energy, and even influence the battlefield in ways that defied conventional understanding. But she knew her power alone was not enough. Humanity's strength lay in their ingenuity, courage, and unity. Commander Harren approached, his expression serious but respectful. "Princess," he said, "this will be the largest battle yet. The Zephyrians have brought everything. We may not survive if we make mistakes." Lyra's gaze hardened. "We will survive, Harren, not because we are stronger than them, but because we refuse to be broken. Humanity does not give up. We adapt, we fight, and we win." The first wave of the Zephyrians struck at dawn. Energy beams rained down from orbit, leveling sections of the city, while walkers advanced through the streets, tearing through barricades and destroying infrastructure. Drones flew in coordinated formations, scanning for human targets. The humans had prepared meticulously, but the scale of the assault was overwhelming. Lyra moved among her soldiers, her presence a source of calm amidst chaos. "Hold your positions," she instructed. "Observe the patterns. Anticipate their moves. Strike where they are weakest." She closed her eyes for a moment, extending her senses outward. She could feel the vibrations of the battlefield, the rhythm of machines, the pulse of energy in the enemy weapons. Her powers had grown so strong that she could sense each individual enemy unit, even across hundreds of meters. She directed her soldiers accordingly, anticipating attacks and guiding countermeasures. The first clashes were intense. Walkers fell into traps, energy beams misfired, and ambushes decimated advancing forces. Yet the Zephyrians adapted quickly, sending elite units directly to Lyra's location. They intended to end the battle by capturing or killing the war princess. Lyra sensed their approach before they were visible. She gestured subtly, and her soldiers moved to intercept the threat. Small energy pulses, barely perceptible, disrupted the enemy sensors and destabilized their footing. One by one, the elite units were neutralized, forced to retreat or fall under human fire. Despite the chaos, the humans fought with unmatched determination. Civilians had returned to assist, operating communications, repairing critical systems, and guiding militia units. Engineers repurposed captured Zephyrian technology, creating new weapons and defenses almost overnight. Soldiers moved with a precision that suggested instinct and training had become one. Lyra's presence amplified this effect. Every command, every gesture, every strategy seemed to ripple through her people, awakening potential they had never known they possessed. Lyra knew the decisive moment had to come quickly. The Zephyrians had concentrated their power into a massive flagship orbiting the planet, a warship capable of destroying entire cities in minutes. If it remained operational, human defenses would eventually crumble. Lyra formulated a plan. She would need to combine human ingenuity, coordinated strategy, and her own powers to bring down the ship. It was risky, perhaps impossible, but failure was not an option. Under the cover of smoke and debris, Lyra led a strike team to the launch bay, where human ships were prepared for a daring assault. She selected pilots she trusted implicitly, soldiers who had demonstrated courage, skill, and adaptability beyond their years. "This mission will test everything you know," she told them. "Your lives matter, but your courage will matter more. We fight not just for survival, but for the spirit of humanity itself." The human ships launched, moving through debris and enemy fire with calculated precision. Lyra focused her energy, extending her perception to guide them, anticipating Zephyrian counterattacks before they happened. She could feel the pulse of the flagship, the flow of energy in its weapons, and the movements of its shields. Each human ship struck at precisely the right time, exploiting the weaknesses she sensed in the alien defenses. The flagship's defenses faltered, energy shields flickered, and weapons misfired. Lyra's soldiers on the ground synchronized their attacks with the orbital strike, targeting key points with precision. The flagship, once thought invincible, began to collapse under coordinated assault. Zephyrians in orbit struggled to adapt, but human ingenuity and Lyra's powers created a chaos they could not control. The climax came when Lyra directed the final strike. Focusing all her energy, she manipulated the flow of energy around the flagship, disrupting critical systems. Explosions ripped through the ship as human forces struck simultaneously. The flagship shuddered, then tore apart, its remains falling into orbit as the humans below cheered. The battle was not without cost, but the victory was undeniable. The tide of war had turned. With the flagship destroyed, the Zephyrians were forced to retreat. Their forces scattered, demoralized, and leaderless. Humanity had not only survived but had proven their strength, intelligence, and resilience beyond any doubt. Lyra stood among her people, her presence a beacon of hope and triumph. The aftermath was both sobering and inspiring. Cities lay in ruins, families mourned lost loved ones, and the cost of war was painfully clear. Yet the human spirit was unbroken. Survivors rebuilt their homes, repaired infrastructure, and celebrated the courage that had saved them. Lyra moved among them, offering guidance, reassurance, and gratitude. She understood that true victory was not just in defeating an enemy, but in restoring hope, unity, and pride among her people. In the following weeks, Lyra continued to train and inspire humans, helping them awaken abilities that had lain dormant for centuries. Scientists studied captured Zephyrian technology, engineers innovated, and soldiers refined their skills. Humanity had grown stronger, not just through survival, but through awakening potential that no one had thought possible. Lyra's leadership had transformed them into a species capable of facing any challenge, no longer underestimated by the galaxy. The Zephyrians never returned. The legend of the War Princess spread far beyond Urindor, reaching neighboring civilizations. Humans were no longer seen as fragile or weak. They were a force to be reckoned with, guided by courage, ingenuity, and a leader who had awakened the true potential of her people. Lyra reflected on the journey. She had begun as a sheltered princess, unsure of her place in the galaxy. Through war, loss, and struggle, she had discovered her own strength and the hidden potential of humanity. Her powers, once subtle, were now fully realized. She could sense energy, anticipate movements, and influence the battlefield in ways that had once seemed impossible. Yet she knew that her greatest power was not the ability to manipulate energy. It was her ability to inspire, to unite, and to awaken courage in every human heart. Standing on the balcony of the rebuilt palace, Lyra gazed at the stars. The galaxy was vast, full of unknown dangers and civilizations far older and stronger than humans had ever encountered. Yet humanity had proven itself capable of survival, innovation, and courage. They were no longer a species to be dismissed. Lyra smiled faintly, feeling the pulse of energy around her, the collective strength of her people, and the possibilities of the future. The war had awakened something more than power. It had awakened identity, spirit, and potential. Humanity had been tested, and they had risen. The War Princess, once a name whispered in fear and admiration, had become a symbol of hope, courage, and unbreakable will. The galaxy would remember that humans were not weak, and that when pushed to the edge, they could achieve greatness beyond imagination. Lyra knew that challenges would come again, as they always did, but she also knew that humanity was ready. They had faced the impossible, discovered their strength, and awakened powers that no one had expected. The story of the War Princess and the rise of humanity was not just a tale of survival. It was a testament to what a species could achieve when led by courage, guided by wisdom, and fueled by an unyielding spirit. As night fell over the rebuilt cities, Lyra stood with Commander Harren and the leaders of her people. They looked at the stars together, knowing that the galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed. The War Princess had awakened the true power not just in herself, but in every human who followed her. And the legend, though born of war, would endure for generations, a reminder that courage, unity, and ingenuity could overcome even the greatest odds. The galaxy was watching, and humanity, led by Princess Lyra, was ready to face whatever came next. War awakened the true power of the human princess.